so much. Hi, Commissioner Barnes. Can you hear us okay? All right, excellent. We're about to start. We're acting on public comment tonight.
It was good though. Those things are really helpful. Are we ready to roll? 1 minute, 30 seconds. Yes.
Good evening. I would like to call to order the Regional Planning Commission Thursday, January 24th edition. And Damian, if we could start with roll call, please.
Frank Peterson? Here. James Fewens?
Here.
Diane Vanderwell?
Here.
James Barnes? Here. Sarah Chavilicek?
Here.
Larry Chesney?
Here.
Ed Hawkins?
Here.
Kevin Weisky? Absent. And Peter Gower?
Here. And I believe we have a quorum, so we will move on to item number 2, salute to the flag. Commissioner Vanderwell, will you lead us this evening?
Sure. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Move on to item number 3, looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll
Mr.
move
Chair.
to approve. Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right. We will move on then to item number 4, approval of the minutes. Looking for a motion if there isn't any feedback or comments on our December 12th, 2018 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, I move for approval of the December 12th, 2018 Planning Commission minutes.
A second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We'll move on then to item number 5, general public comment. Damien, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. We have 3 for this item. Tammy Holt still. Then after that would be Russ Earl.
Just a reminder, speakers have 3 minutes, and please state your name when you get there.
Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. For the record, the water's there and rising, and we are here, still here. As of December 16th, or excuse me, January 16th to now, we have a certified record that the water has come up 11 inches from the storms and still rising. We also have Washoe County pumping from the North Prado to the South Prado, and it's close to getting to Lemon Drive, so then they're gonna have to worry about pumping from Lemon Drive over Lemon Drive to the lake. And then you have to worry about whether you're gonna flood out the people at Shane and James and Pompey. So, with all of that said, there's still issues out there. Development is not the right way to go right now until you fix the situation. As I stated to somebody else, we need to get to ground zero. Number one, that lake needs to be emptied to just the 400 acres that is supposed to be the actual wildlife preserve, and then go from there. We need to know exactly what's making all that water be there, besides it's just the storms. There's more than just the storms. You also know that the city of Reno, at 3 weeks ago meeting, only have 400 permits left for the Stead sewer plant. So you have all of that water going into, or affluent, that's not water, that's affluent, going into Swan Lake. So development in any part of the North Valleys that affects that hydrological basin needs to stop. Just does, until you can figure out and fix the situation before moving forward. Based upon a report I read, right now, since 1999 and now, the amount of impervious ground has increased by double. It started out at 1,098 acres, and now it's up to 2,000 and something acres of impervious ground. What does that do to Swan Lake when Swan Lake's only 1,800 acres? There's a problem, and we need to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Now Russ Earl, and after that will be Gordon Gassad.
Good evening, Russ Earl representing the Silver Knolls Community Organization. This, unfortunately, you folks have seen me so many times, this is like a sad version of Groundhog Day. Everything Tammy said is so true out there. I mean, your own surveys have shown that most people at this point are favoring infill development, not peripheral development, which keeps coming up here over and over again, whether it's regional planning, joint planning, City of Reno, Washoe County. The developers keep trying to push for this peripheral development, which until we get some of the issues, with infrastructure issues taken care of, we really shouldn't even be considering this. We've got traffic problems, we've got all the sewer problems. There is no plan in place that I have seen. There are some ideas about groundwater injection, but none of our sewer treatment plants even come close to being able to treat the water to the level that would be required to inject that water back into the drinking water ground table. And to do that would be tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of fixing our sewer treatment plants. That money would be paid for by current residents. The impact fees that the developers pay would come nowhere even close to touching what that would cost. So the taxpayers would be stuck with the bill for that, while the developers walk off with, their wallets and purses full of cash from their developments, and they're not responsible for that. I don't feel that's fair to our current taxpayers, many residents that have been here generations. We need to get intelligent about the way we're going about our development. Let's come up with some solid plans, figure out how we're going to pay for this, whether the federal government can come in with some matching grants, fix some of our roads. I mean, it took me to get from Carson home to Red Rock the other day, it took me 1 hour and 45 minutes. I can drive to Sacramento in that time almost. It's just absurd at this point that we have to deal with that on a daily basis. Safety is another thing. I mean, you look at the county sheriff's department, for those of us in the unincorporated areas right now, there is no increase to their budget since 1995 generally. We're at the same manning level from almost 20 some odd years ago. That's absurd. Our population level has more than doubled in that time frame. And I know Reno PD and Reno Fire, they have similar issues. I just went to get an insurance quote today. The ISO ratings are horrible because of the response times it takes both Truckee Meadows and Reno to get out to those areas. Stonegate, the proposed Echeverria, that Station 9 at the back of Stead is going to be the one responsible for that. Their response time isn't going to be real great to that either. Never mind, they're not going to have the manning to be constantly running out there, or Stonegate. So these are things we need to take into consideration before we consider approving such things as high-density development like we'll be looking for at Echeverria tonight. So thank you. Please take that all into consideration.
Thank you.
And the last one is Gordon Gassage.
Yeah, my name is Gordon Gossage, and I'm with I'm with YIMBY of Northern Nevada. And I should say that we are representing tens of thousands of people who live in the greater Reno area who don't come to venues like this. I have to tell you, for many people, this is very intimidating to speak in front of you, and we're going to be training people on how to do that. I should also tell you that I spent 4 months towards the end of last year working on the Tesla assembly line, making $17.83 an hour. And many of my coworkers need a better place to live. Some of them are living in Siegel suites. I have a coworker who is a single mom with 2 kids living in essentially a motel room. These people can't afford a $400,000 median price home. Nor can they afford any of the buildings that are being contemplated for some of the areas in outlying regions. However, what they can do is move into an area like the Echeverrias are doing a great job proposing, and that is to use smart greenfield principles. Jeremy has taught me a lot about what a smart greenfield is, and there's no reason that every development on the periphery can't also be a smart development. So I would urge you to make the decisions. I mean, even if you feel like you have to make demands and have Andy Durling come back and tell you, how you can fulfill the demands, what you don't want to do is always delay the process. I know you don't like to hear that, but if there's a way that we could all work together, because I can also bring in experts, from outside who can help in the process. As part of that, I'm happy to announce as of yesterday that we're working with EDAWN. On March 7th, we have an expert coming in to do a big presentation. His name is Stefan Lehmann. He actually just took over the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, the architectural school there. And he is an expert worldwide on what they called regenerative development. He helped build the New Berlin. A few months ago, he was actually in Stockholm working. And you'll get more information on that. But I really want you and everyone in the community, everyone, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, whatever you are, to come together, because 2019 is when we have to accelerate the amount of housing being built. It's very simple. If the housing supply is restricted, the price will go up. So we actually have to build more than 4,000 units a year in order to bring down that median price. So again, let's try to put all the vitriol aside and let's work together and have affordable and workforce housing. Thank you.
Tell me the name of your group again, please.
Oh, yeah, it's YIMBY. YIMBY of Northern Nevada. That's YIMBY. It stands for Yes in My Backyard. And all you got to do is Google YIMBY of Northern Nevada, and you're there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Damien, any other? Oh, we do. Hello.
Oh, yes. All right.
Long time no see.
Hi, Denise Ross. For the record, in response to what the gentleman's saying, I personally have family members that have worked at Apple that make $25 to $30 an hour. They still, Apple and Tesla has people coming up from California. They commute in their vehicles, 3 or 4 people at a time. They come up here and they stay in one hotel room. They go to work, they get paid, they take the money back to California. And that's time and time and time again. So when somebody's trying to tell you that you need to approve these developments for the people that are working and that are coming from California, remember, it's all not what it appears to be. I don't believe what that gentleman had to say.
Danny, you want to add to that?
Danny Cleus for the record. This just came out. Report, Washoe County ranked the lowest in housing affordability statewide. All those projects that everybody's been complaining about are getting passed because they're not affordable. Here we go again, high density housing, going for 300 plus. In this report, it also states that you have to earn $100,000 a year to afford to live here. How many jobs do we have in the Washoe County for the average blue collar worker? You make $100,000. Not too many. Even construction workers don't make $100,000 a year. Pretty sad. But you keep approving projects that do not have affordable housing, as they call it. Back when houses were, back in the 70s, $60,000 to $70,000. A blue-collar worker could afford those at the same rate as they're getting paid today. What's wrong with this picture? Everybody's complaining about affordable housing. EDON, they're the biggest people here, the biggest complaint. They're bringing in all these industries, but they're not willing to pay anybody a higher salary. EDON, keep bringing them in, paying $15 an hour, everything works. No, it doesn't. So, everybody wants affordable housing? Go back to the 70s and get their houses. Because it's not gonna work. If you flood the area with $400,000, $500,000 houses, it's not gonna lower the market. Higher density houses in rural areas, that's not the answer either. Echeverris, they have property, 1+ acres below the property they want to make high density. You can't do that, not going up my mountain. That's a beautiful view. Quit messing up the land, because all that higher density houses that you stick up there, it all comes down to one area. And you see, this is going on 3 years. 3 years. Where else in the United States do you know that you have a 3-year flood warning at any time? I got pumps down the street, around the corner from me. 3 years. Cost $70,000 for Washoe County a month. They could have done something else to fix the problem.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a comment on this general public comment item?
Did
Did you want to, ma'am?
No? Oh, different item, okay. All right, we'll see none. We will close that general public comment item. We'll have public comment opportunities during the public hearing items, which we will get into now with item 6A. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. All right, good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, TMRPA for the record. The case before you is a regional plan conformance review for a City of Reno Master Plan Amendment, Coyote Crossing, case number CR 18-01. Here is the regional location map showing the subject property. And then to help visualize the request, here is a map from the City of Reno. The site is currently designated parks, greenways, and open space. Materials submitted indicate that the parks, greenways, and open space master plan land use designation adopted for the site as part of the Reimagine Reno update was applied to the entire site in error. City of Reno staff identified that based on the adopted zoning designations, which supported the previous single-family residential land use that existed on the site, the eastern portion of the site, currently zoned SF15, approximately 3.4 acres, should have been designated single-family neighborhood, not parks, greenways, and open space. Then the 8.76 acre site is located on the north side of Rock Chuck Road at its western terminus. This slide shows the aerial imagery from 2016. And then as indicated on this slide, the site is part of the City of Reno's portion of the Truckee Meadows Service Areas, or TMSA. For context, the single-family neighborhood designation could result in a maximum of 8 dwelling units per acre. Additionally, the proposed land use of open space and single-family neighborhood will match the existing land uses in the area and are therefore compatible with the surrounding area. And then on to the review criteria. Policy 4.1.3 of the regional plan identifies the six factors that the RPC must consider, which are listed on this slide. We have touched on some of these factors. In addition, no portion of the amendment site is considered development constrained per the regional plan. Materials submitted indicate that public infrastructure and services to serve the site currently exist or are in place. And then finally, in relation to the goals and policies of the regional plan, regional planning staff has not identified any significant conformance issues and recommends approval of the proposal based on consistency and/or compatibility with the review factors listed on this slide. And finally, you can find the suggested motion on the screen or on page 10 of your packet. This concludes staff's presentation. TMRPA and City of Reno staff are available for any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris. I will open this up for public comment. Damien, do you have any public comment on this item?
I have none for this item.
Okay. Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the item, bring it back to the commission for questions, discussion, or a motion. Commissioner Hawkins, sorry, missed your.
It's not there. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Commissioner Hawkins, over the past 6 months, we've looked as a planning commission for City of Reno on a couple of projects that indicated staff made an error. Well, how many times are we going to go through this staff made an error and let them have a gimme? Okay? We have to be able to do something as a board or a commission to straighten some of this stuff out, because as staff presented here, it was a mistake when they transferred zoning and all that over from one entity to another. And this has happened a couple other times in the last 6 months to a year. So I'm just kind of curious as a board, do we let this one go by and say, well, staff made a mistake and we just let it go by, or do we give it a thumbs down? That's just, I'm done with staff making mistakes, and then everybody gets a gimme, and where we sit. That's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Responses to Commissioner Hawkins? Commissioner Chesney?
Yeah, I don't disagree with Commissioner Hawkins, but I don't see that the remedy to this error, not everybody's perfect, but I don't see the remedy to this error is going to hurt anything. It's a flip-flop of the property one way or the other, I think. So if, what is gained by not going ahead and trying to fix the mistake?
Commissioner Hawkins, yeah, it's not to be impunitive or anything toward this development. I've spoken with Rubicon Design, and before we got to this point, it was, they were only going to give us back 1.37 acres instead of the 3-something that they're indicating in the report right now. I think that's great. I just want to be on record saying we got to start tightening things up. We can't be letting the gimme go, and if everybody knows what I mean, it's just, that's just my discussion point is let's tighten things up and no more gimmies.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner, let's start with Commissioner Vanderwell, and then we'll go to Commissioner Trevillecheck.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins, while I appreciate your comments and things like that, it sounds like this is something that needs to be handled down at the City of Reno, not necessarily up here at Regional Planning. So while I appreciate your comments, I concur with Commissioner Chesney that we all make mistakes, and what we're trying to do is remedy it to move forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Trevillecheck?
Nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Any other discussion on the item? If not, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Chesney, I move to find that the Coyote Crossing amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan is in conformance with the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the finding listed in the staff report.
Second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. We will move on then to item 6B. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening again, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, Team RPA for the record. The item before you is the consideration and final action on the objection submitted by the City of Reno on the Regional Planning Commission's determination of nonconformance regarding the proposed Reno Master Plan Amendment for Echeverria Peavine property, and the case number is CR 18-015. So for this item, the RPC should make a final determination affirming, reversing, or modifying the RPC's action from the November 14, 2018 meeting regarding this case. Regional Planning staff, and then a little on the process. Regional Planning staff will give a brief overview of the item, followed by Reno staff's presentation of the objection, and Regional Planning staff will come back with review factors and potential motions for final action. And then again, you regionally heard this at the November 14 meeting, but for background, the proposal is to amend the master plan designation from special planning area, Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan, High Density Rural, to City of Reno Master Plan Land Use Designation of Unincorporated Transition and Large Lot Neighborhood. The details regarding the acreage are presented overhead. Here is a regional location map showing the subject property. At the November 14, 2018 RPC meeting, the RPC determined that the proposed master plan amendment did not conform with the comprehensive regional plan because the commission could not make findings, 1, for regional form and pattern, 2, development constraints, 4, public services and infrastructure, and 6, cumulative impacts. Following that meeting, the City of Reno filed an objection pursuant to Section 5 of NRS Section 278.0282. The objection was provided to the Commission in Attachment 3 to the staff report. So at this time, we will turn it over to the City of Reno for a presentation on their objection.
Hi, Heather.
Good evening, Chair Gower and Planning Commission members. Heather Manzo, Associate Planner with the City of Reno, for the record. At the RPC meeting that was held in November, the Planning Commission had a lot of questions as far as what transpired following the joint Planning Commission meeting that was held to review this case. And with that, and following the RPC's decision to forward a recommendation to the governing board to approve the removal of the subject site from the joint corridor plan, and then following that decision with the denial of the requested master plan amendment to assign the City of Reno master plan designations to the property. Staff provided information to City Council outlining the reasons that we felt the findings could be made, and the City Council did direct staff to go ahead and file the request for your reconsideration this evening. And in your report this evening, you do have the staff report information that was provided from the City Council report. That includes the resolutions from both Washoe County Governing Board, or sorry, Washoe County Commission, as well as the City Council on both actions. And hopefully that provides a little bit of clarification as to what transpired at the joint governing body meeting. And so I wanted to just highlight a couple of items, if I could please have the overhead. So this map is the Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan, and it identifies the subject site, which consists of two parcels separated from one another by a railroad line. And so in the joint corridor plan, the northern portion has a City of Reno zoning designation of large lot residential, 2.5 acres. And on the south side, it does not have City of Reno zoning assigned to it, but it does have Washoe County or Reno-Stead Corridor joint plan designation of general rural, which was carried forward from Washoe County map assignment back when the joint plan was adopted. And so with those two designations, the northern portion, as the joint plan identifies land use, it allows for a 2.5 acre to 5 acre minimum lot size per unit. And on the southern portion, the general rural allows for 1 unit per 40 acres. And very briefly, I just wanted to highlight, this was included in the Reno Planning Commission's resolution to deny the requested intensification of the site. What this essentially would have done is translated or modified the master plan designations that are currently in the Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan by assigning City of Reno designations that would have intensified the site to allow for approximately a maximum of 3,000 dwelling units. And the Reno Planning Commission and Washoe County was uncomfortable with that request when it went to the Joint Planning Commission. And so both bodies did recommend that the governing bodies deny this request. And what ultimately happened when this went to the governing body for, the joint governing body for consideration is both the Washoe County Commission and the City of Reno Council approved the request to remove the site from the Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan area. In addition to that, the City Council then had the sole authority to consider a master plan amendment for assignment of City of Reno designations. And that request was ultimately, the applicant's request was ultimately denied, and what the City Council chose to do and is outlined in their resolution is to simply assign City of Reno master plan designations that most closely translated to the existing Reno Said Corridor Joint Plan designations. And so on the north side of the property, the master plan amendment would then identify that northern property as large lot neighborhood, which allows for large lot zoning, including the LLR 2.5 that's currently in place today on the property. On the southern portion, the general rural translation into City of Reno land use designations is the unincorporated transition. And so essentially the request that's before you today is a master plan amendment to assign City of Reno designations that would, as of today, per this request, it would essentially allow for the same number of dwelling units on that entire site. And so this table is included in the staff report that was forwarded to you by regional planning staff, and it does show the Reno Said Corridor Joint Plan designations as they are today. And if City of Reno master plan designations are assigned, it does show the conforming zoning districts and the total allowable number of units based on the master plan amendment that's before you this evening. So I hope that provides some clarification as far as this request goes. And as I mentioned, the staff report that we forwarded on to you from the City of Reno outlined the findings that the RPC was unable to make in our request for you to reconsider this request tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
And then a bit of clarification, to clarify our role in reviewing land use changes. So we consider the master plan amendments and densities specified therein for the purpose of determining whether they conform with the goals and policies of the master plan. Reno's explanation provided greater context utilizing the zoning. And this commission will only look at the master plan amendment, which has a greater density range, and speaking generally also on that. If this is approved, future zoning map amendments to intensify the land would be under the purview of the City of Reno. So that's offered as a bit of a clarification from regional planning staff. And then for reference, getting back to the previous, really this is a slide from the old presentation, but for reference, this is the review criteria that the RPC must utilize for determinations of conformance. Again, staff's previous analysis of these factors was provided in the November 14th staff report. And then again, the RPC should make a final determination affirming, reversing, or modifying the RPC's previous action. You can find the possible motions on the screen or on page 36 of your packet. As indicated, the conformance motion would reverse the RPC's original determination, and the non-conformance motion would uphold the RPC's original determination. This does conclude staff's presentation. TMRPA and City of Reno staff are available for any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. Thanks, Heather, for those presentations. That was helpful. We will open up the public hearing portion of this item and ask for public comment. Damien, do we have a request to speak on this item?
Yes, we do. We have 3 this evening. It'll be Andy Durling, and then after that will be Tammy Holtstill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, for the record, Andy Durling with Wood Rogers, representing the Echeverria family, the property owner. For the property in question, we are here tonight to offer our support to the City of Reno's objection. This quite simply is, does not need to be as convoluted as it kind of appears to be. This is really, one action took place. That action was to remove this property from the Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan. In doing so, the joint plan utilizes county designations, and so removing it from that takes away the county's designations and then translates those into City of Reno designations. There's no intensification of the site, there's no density increase. It really is just simply a translation from county designations to city designations. So we offer our expertise if it's necessary to answer any questions, but are in full agreement with the City of Reno's objection and encourage you to approve this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up will be Tammy Holtstill, and after that will be Russ Earl.
Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. The findings that you made last time, the thing that they have brought before you changes what your findings were last time. So you have to stick with the nonconformance and uphold your original decision based upon the fact that there's been no changes. In fact, they have admitted that the whole point that the city of Reno is fighting this is because of the fact they want it in the city of Reno so that only the city of Reno has discussion on what happens with this property. They also want to take it out of the conformance of one home for 40 acres. That's it in a nutshell. You need to uphold your original decision. I think it's appalling that city staff are fighting for a developer. The developer should be fighting for themselves, not the city. And I think it's your responsibility to do the right thing here. And the right thing is that they are not conforming to what is out there, they're not conforming to the policies, and that it needs to stay the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last one will be Russ Earl.
Yes, good evening. Russ Earl, Silver Knolls Community Organization. I would like to echo Tammy's, all her sentiments and remind you of a couple other issues. The adverse effects of whether it's 67 and all in the city of Reno or left the way it is right now, there's adverse effects to any development in that area. And as I previously stated, fire is one of the major ones. A new thing that's occurred since last I spoke to you was the outgoing CAL FIRE chief, and I understand we are not California, but we all live under the same environmental impacts and winds that California has. He has recently called for an absolute moratorium on all new building of housing in the urban wildland interface. And if any of you drive up 395, you know the winds coming off of Washoe in that area are just incredible. They flip over semis regularly. There's now special signs, and they shut down 395 to semis at times. So if we have a fire, it's going to spread rapidly. There's going to be adverse effects. We don't have proper infrastructure, and we don't have proper fire protection. And I believe that is one of your criteria. Do we have proper services? And we are not going to have proper services for a fire if it gets started up on Peavine, and we have one of the windy times. Another thing I wanted to remind you is we currently already have more housing approved, and I think it was your own survey that showed this. In the next 20 years, what's going to be needed is approximately 30-some-odd thousand units to be built. Currently on the books, we have over 50,000 approved. So the shell game of the developers, which I see where this is going, they get a like for like, 57 for 57, and next week they turn around when they can only deal with Reno, is ask for that to go into high density. Their original plan was for up to 17 units per acre. So we all see where they're going with this, but that's not what's before you tonight. But we ask you to uphold your original findings under your original purview, under your original facts. Nothing has changed. It's just which hand is holding the property and has control over how it's dealt with. So please be the regional planning and look out for all of us on this, because there's plenty of us that are impacted that aren't going to be living in the city of Reno, and they're not going to be listening to us as they listen to you. So please support us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I got just one more, Denise Ross.
Denise Ross. I would ask that you would stick to your last to the last decision. This has nothing to do with affordable housing. These types of homes are sitting on 5 acres. The standard regular person around here can't afford that. So as far as it being affordable housing and you trying to meet the goals to bring in that type of housing, it doesn't fit. It was declined before because it couldn't meet the findings. We have the problem with the fire, we have the problem with the sewer. It's like a wind tunnel there. I just was so struck by the way that the gentleman said before, how it was a wind tunnel, and if it catches on fire, it's gonna keep going. We don't have the fire, we don't have the sewer, we don't have response from the police department. I don't know what it's gonna take. I don't know why staff keeps pushing things. Like Tammy said, they should be working for the people, not for the developer. So please, uphold your past decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a comment on this item? Okay, if not, we will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like the good doctor to come up and speak to us about some numbers like we talked about today at the RIF. Talk to us about that area out there, if you would, please.
Oh, you bet. Jeremy Smith, GS Coordinator at TMRP for the record. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time looking at that particular property, but through the work we've done to look at development potential, we like to talk about it in terms of a development pipeline. So at any given time, on paper, theoretically, through the master planning process, through the PUD and tentative map process, there can be many, many units, tens of thousands of units that have been approved to some level. However, it is a pipeline, and there are discretionary viewpoints along that. So right now, when last I looked, I don't know the exact number, but we have probably on the order of 3,000 to 4,000 building-ready lots right now in our community that have been recorded with the Washoe County Assessor. That's really the level you need to get to, right, before you can actually build something. Previous to that, you would have gotten a tentative map to some degree. Prior to that, it could be something like a planned unit development, and then beyond that, it's just the zoning and a master plan land use, which, to my understanding from what I've heard today, is what we're talking about here. When you take all of that together, so just straight zoning, even if areas are not served well by infrastructure, right, there's not a sewer line there yet or not a water line, but you just take everything we've approved on paper, we have approaching 100,000 units of potential. That includes our very high density, no maximum areas in our mixed use TOD type and center geographies, but also all of the planned unit developments, all the tentative maps, and all of the straight zoning that's out there. So, I'm not exactly sure if that answers your question, but there's quite a few units theoretically on paper, and what we're really working towards in the regional plan update is to try to coordinate the provision of public services such that fire, police, water, sewer, roads, everyone's working together with a similar plan so that we know very easily where we do have the capacity to serve intensification of density or new developments. That's a process that I think will be ongoing, but that's the direction we're trying to promote in our regional plan update, so that we really are trying to more closely link ahead of time, right? All of the facility plans that all of the good work that the folks at our jurisdictions and affected entities do, so that we can really focus in on where we think it's best for our community to grow. That said, if someone has the means to provide their own infrastructure out to something, it's possible that could be also on the table. I don't know if that got where you wanted to go, though.
Yeah, that got pretty close. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Vanderbilt.
Yes, can I have City of Reno staff come up? Hi, thank you. I just have a question. Out to this property, what would be the time response from Station 9? Is it within the 6-minute or out?
Heather Manzo, Associate Planner, I do believe that at this time it's outside of the 6-minute or 8-minute response time.
Okay. Now, another thing, because it's my understanding that City of Reno is passing a policy or ordinance that any new development that's out of the 6 to 8 minute response time, that the developer has to make sure that there's sprinkler systems in the new housing.
I believe that has to do with the fire code adoption.
Correct.
And I do believe that there are some policies related to sprinklering if it's outside of a certain response time. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Chvilchek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start with regional planning staff first, just for some clarification. A few moments ago, you said after the City of Reno gave their report with regards to density on the north and the south, you offered another statement. Could you restate that for me again, please?
So this was, again, the clarification of regional's role in reviewing land use changes. In particular, we consider master plan amendments and densities specified therein for the purpose of determining whether they conform with the goals and policies of the regional plan. So then Reno's explanation provides greater context utilizing zoning. This commission will only look at master plan amendments which in general have a greater density range than a zoning code, than a zone would. If this is approved, future zoning map amendments to intensify the land would be under the purview of the City of Reno. Does that answer what you're looking for?
Yes. Okay, thank you. I think I'm good for right now.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I have a question. Heather, can you put up the that transition table with the land uses and potential zoning? So as I understand at the top of that, the first table is describing the existing master plan land use, so the number of units based on the master plan land use for county designations in the Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan. County, okay, so a combination of county and city, depending on where you are within the site. The second table gets a little bit jumbled because it's telling us some different stuff, right? So the first row in that second table is the master plan designation and zoning districts. So the translation in that last column is an assumption that it would be translated to a zoning designation that allows for 57 units. Same thing with the second row, that we go from master plan down to an assumption that zoning would allow for 10 units for 67. So what do the other numbers mean that are in that table?
Absolutely. Heather Manzo, Associate Planner for the record, and thank you for the question. And you're right, it does get a little bit busier on that second table because we do have, where Washoe County had a single map that they utilized back when the land use designations were assigned using the Washoe County mapping method. They had a one map system at that time. And so there is one zoning district that conforms to the one master plan designation. With the City of Reno master plan designations, we took a look at, on that northern portion, the LLR 2.5, which is what the current zoning is, and that is the maximum developable number of units as it is today. And so the translation for LLR 2.5 would be that large lot neighborhood master plan designation. On the southern portion, where it's currently general rural, that would translate to City of Reno unincorporated transition, and that's at the 1 unit per 40 acres maximum density. And so based on that conversion using the table in Title 18, the site would be assigned, if the master plan amendment is adopted, it would be assigned the UT 40 zoning designation. And so on that maximum density number of units portion on that right-hand side, it's the UT 40 and the LLR 2.5 are what would be applicable should the master plan amendment be approved. The other density counts would require at a minimum, a zoning map amendment that would be need to be reviewed by the Reno Planning Commission and City Council in order for any of those increased densities to be allowed on this site. I hope that helps to answer your question.
It does, and I think the challenge, and speaking as one, but one of 9 here, and the reason that we landed the way we did the last go around is that at the regional level, we can't necessarily look at zoning decisions. We're looking at the master plan and what the master plan would allow. So it's confusing because we're seeing 67 under existing conditions, and we're seeing what looks like 67 under proposed conditions, but in reality, if this master plan amendment is found in conformance with the regional plan, that would actually allow for, through subsequent processes, up to 396 units. So I think that's the discrepancy that we're looking at and trying to resolve in our position on regional planning, because we're not sitting on the local government commission. That's sort of a comment blended in with a question. But I'd be open for more questions or discussion. Remember, we have Commissioner Barnes on the phone too. Commissioner Chivilchek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that clarification, because that's what's still rolling around in my head, is that when we originally heard this in November, we had almost a very different plan in front of us. And now there's a modifier to that plan. So it's very convoluted, and it's hard to reach into what is, because what I see there is that tonight the idea is being presented that this property will not be developed beyond the 67, but the potential exists for it to be, for that development to intensify, and then it would fall under, it would probably still have regional significance, but who knows, that's down the road. But I'm very troubled by this chart and trying to find some understanding and some clarity to what we did in November versus what's being asked of us tonight.
Commissioner Barnes, did you have a question?
No, I'm just listening to the discussion here.
Okay. Lauren, you want to
Yeah.
jump in?
Mr. Chair, if I may. So there's one other piece that I think the Planning Commission may want to take into consideration for this specific project. So back in November, when you made the original determination of nonconformance, there was also an item on the agenda regarding the regional plan amendment to remove this specific parcel or this property from the Reno-Stead Joint Corridor Plan. So if this master plan amendment isn't approved in the Reno-Stead Joint Corridor Plan case that moves forward to the Regional Planning Governing Board does get approved, it does leave this specific area in a little bit of limbo in terms of, all right, what is the master plan land use that exists on site? So that item has not been taken forward yet to the Regional Planning Governing Board because we're kind of waiting on what's going to happen here to see where that lands and what we do with the master plans that would exist on site, because it is a bit of a gray area at this point if this isn't approved. So I just wanted to put that out for the Planning Commission's consideration as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chesney, you have a question? No?
No, I'd like to propose a motion.
Commissioner Funes?
Yeah, so Commissioner Funes, on our November meeting, we did vote to remove from the joint Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan and move it into the city of Reno. And I think we need to let the city of Reno do their thing. I mean, that's what, that, by removing it and taking it out of the joint corridor and moving it into the city of Reno, and just by moving, potentially, possibly, yes, but right now what we're looking at is just moving over the zones or the conforming zoning districts to currently what they are currently at. I think it is by doing one action, removing it out of the joint, and then saying, hey, by the way, we still want to kind of have a say in it. And by not letting them do their thing, I think is hurting the process by not letting it move forward, my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion? Commissioner
Yes.
Trelchak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for staff is that in November, we took 2 actions. So if you could just review what those 2 actions were, again, for clarification.
Absolutely. So the first action that this Planning Commission took was to recommend approval of the removal of this project site from the Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan. And the second action was based on this master plan amendment request, and it was to deny the translation of the master plan land uses to the ones that are being proposed.
But what was being proposed to us is very different than what we're seeing tonight.
The proposal is the same, the clarification piece is what you're seeing tonight. So that is the piece that is further clarified with the objection from the City of Reno staff.
If there's no other discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
To the chair, Commissioner Chesney. I move to uphold the RPC's determination of November 14th, 2018, and a meeting of November 14th, 2018, and find the Echeverria Peavine property amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan does not conform to the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the finding listed in the staff report.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay. So we do a roll call vote if we could, Damien.
Yes, of course. Frank Peterson? Aye. James Fewens?
Nay.
Diane Vanderwell?
Nay.
James Barnes?
Nay.
Sarah Chavilicek?
Aye.
Larry Chesney?
Aye.
Ed Hawkins?
Aye.
And Peter Gower?
Aye.
We have 5 in favor and I believe 3 opposed.
We'll look to legal counsel for an explanation on our vote and where that puts us.
Jessica Prenti for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For a finding of nonconformance, we just need a simple majority.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on then to item 6C, guidelines for PRS related to schools. Lauren.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. Just gonna get the presentation loaded up here quickly. All right, so while that's loading, so this agenda item seeks direction on the potential inclusion of schools or certain types of schools as projects of regional significance, and this is item 6C. So to provide some context, this discussion really came about during the Regional Planning Governing Board's review of the Wild Creek Utility Corridor relocation. As some of you may remember, this case involves moving a regional utility corridor on the Wild Creek Golf Course in order to accommodate the eventual development of a high school on the site by the Washoe County School District. So during the RPGB's discussion, concerns arose regarding the fact that schools are generally not reviewed by regional planning, as they often don't require a master plan amendment or trigger a project of regional significance. At the December 13th Regional Planning Governing Board meeting, the board directed staff to bring an item forward to the RPC regarding the potential inclusion of schools or certain types of schools as a PRS. The Nevada revised statutes require that the RPC adopt guidelines and procedures for projects of regional significance. This also allows the RPC to determine what type of projects constitute a project of regional significance. In 2013, the RPC adopted its most current version of the PRS guidelines, which are described in RPC Resolution 13-06. So on the slide overhead, you're going to see some of the discussion points made by the Regional Planning Governing Board members. The discussion really started with high schools, potentially evolved into the inclusion of potential other types of schools like middle schools or private schools. It was stated that these types of schools often have regional impacts. They stated schools have unique challenges. The size of schools is really an important factor. And there are often traffic impacts associated with schools, both due to increased volume and also changing traffic patterns. The governing board also recognized that this may impact the school district and developers. It was noted that another mechanism to review schools is through the conformance review of school facilities plans. Staff has discussed this with the Washoe County School District, and they're currently planning to update their facilities plan, which will then be submitted to us for conformance review, which is an item that we do see here. And lastly, there was discussion that current thresholds can be utilized as a potential starting point if wanted. So this item is really in reference to an existing threshold that deems a project of regional significance if the project will have an impact on the region by increasing student population by 325 students or more. So staff is really looking for the RPC to discuss this item and provide some direction to us on the possible inclusion of schools as a project of regional significance. There are some potential options on the slide above, and additionally, the RPC may choose to utilize a combination of these options. This concludes my presentation. I know there's quite a bit of information, so I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Again, we appreciate the feedback.
Okay, thanks very much. So regional planning staff is looking for feedback. Who's got feedback? Commissioner Chvilcek.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, and thanks for the opportunity. And when we say insert school type here, I truly believe that high schools do have a PRS designation just because of a lot of people driving, a lot of students driving. I mean, definitely high schools, possibly middle schools, but most definitely high schools.
Commissioner Funes?
I think high school's too broad. There are many high schools that have say the high school has 50 students. It's not going to have the traffic problems. I think high school's way too broad, just to say high school. My question is current things that they look on regional significance that come in front of us, does tentative maps and different things that when there are development of more than 625 units, that possibly a high school is going to be going around, doesn't that already come in front of us? Is it just adding another layer of hoops to jump through and kind of bureaucracy? Is kind of my question to that. And I definitely think just schools in general is too broad. And I think 325 students is pretty low. I think that might need to be picked up. We look at the high schools or the public high schools in our community are 2,000 students. Approximately maybe 5,000 to 2,000. I'm not sure on each one of them. So I would say that 325 is a little low for regional significance. Probably need to be bumped up to 1,100, 1,200 or more if we were looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
But my question also is on the tentative maps and different things, does it already drive it? So is this that would be my question. I mean, are these already coming in front of us when they're more than 625 units? The answer is yes.
Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, so the school development itself doesn't come before us, but if a tentative map or a project, some type of master plan community has units of over 625, that project itself would come before us, but not the actual development of a school on a school site.
Mr. Chairman? I would add as a qualifier to my statement about high schools, I would look at public high schools that involve playing fields, parking lots, several buildings that, and because playing fields constitute several hundred students. I think that maybe the 300 threshold is too, but 600 or 1,100 is too high. So I think that high schools are significant in the neighborhoods that they are, and they impact those neighborhoods greatly. So I would redefine that to say high schools that have all those amendments to them, such as playing fields, because they have football fields, baseball fields, track, softball fields, basketball courts, and lots of parking lots.
And Chair Gower, sorry for the interruption.
Sure.
I just, before potential options chosen, I know there's a lot of public comment. I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear that first before discussing further.
Thank you. I forgot to do public comment.
No worries.
Let's do that now. And then Commissioner Vanderwall, we'll start with you once we
That's fine, because
give
it
back to
may,
the commission.
it may have more questions. So
Okay.
perfect, thank you.
Thank
All
you
right,
for
apologies for the
jumping in.
interruption. We have 8 people this evening who want to speak, and first is Pete Etcher. This one?
Pete Etchart, Chief Operating Officer with the Washoe County School District. So representing the county's public school district, I have many concerns with changing the definition of a project of regional significance to automatically include schools. The primary requirements for qualifying as a project of regional significance is defined set of quantitative criteria including employment, sewage, water usage, traffic volumes, etc. It does not identify specific project types except utility generation facilities. If you choose to lower the quantitative criteria so that high schools, middle schools, or even elementary schools would qualify, so be it, but it does not seem right to just arbitrarily include schools. That action would tell me that a property owner could build a super Walmart, a community college, a hospital, a sports facility, or any other large project that generates the same traffic, water usage, etc., and they would not have to go through the same project of regional significance process as a K-12 school. Now, we completely recognize that some of our schools can be more regional in nature. The recent Regional Planning Governing Board discussion on the potential change came up at a recent meeting that we attended regarding the utility corridor relocation for the proposed high school at Wild Creek. Knowing that this specific project had regional impacts based on its location and ownership, we went above and beyond in dealing with this project at a regional level. Numerous regional meetings have been held, including a special joint meeting of elected and appointed officials to discuss this project. The joint meeting included the City of Reno City Council, the City of Sparks City Council, the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners, the RSCVA Board of Directors, and the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees. All 5 agencies agreed to a letter of intent that stated that the highest and best use for the Wild Creek Golf Course is a new public high school and is in the best interest of all citizens of Washoe County. Lastly, all the agencies agreed to cooperate in the planning, development, and construction of a new high school on the property. That being said, regarding Wild Creek, the vast majority of our schools are local neighborhood schools that are only built as necessitated by the local government and regional planning decisions to approve housing developments. I am not sure what we would gain by making these schools projects of regional significance. In this regard, this potential definition change also seems to be, to me, in potential conflict with the intent of our right to ask for a future school land set aside under Nevada Revised Statutes 278. The district works very closely with developers of proposed large developments to make sure that we have the needed land to build the schools that are needed if a project goes forward. For instance, with the recent Stonegate development, we worked for well over a year to determine the optimum sites and craft an agreement for land set-asides for 2 elementary schools and a high school. If the project were not to go forward, neither would these schools. With this definition revision, my biggest concern is that it introduces additional political influence into the process, especially when considering the qualitative nature of regional plan conformance. Since I represented
Eric, can I just finish up with 20 seconds?
Please do.
Lastly, I have been approached by many individuals, including elected officials, in regards to what could be done to speed up the school delivery process. Adding 2 to 4 months to our project approval timeline with this definition change could have a significant impact on getting our schools open in the timely manner that the public desires. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Darlene Hess, and then after that would be John Hess.
Hello, everyone. My name is Darlene Hesse. I live by the Wild Creek Golf Course. I've lived there for 40 years. I am very concerned about the traffic. I'm very concerned about the flooding. That's my main concern. And last week, the water was running, just flowing right down that golf course, and I've seen that happen so many, many times. And I believe that if you people don't pay attention to that water and that flow, and build a school there where there will not be any way for the land to absorb the water, all that water is going to run down onto McCarran and on down to further into the homes. And I think you people really should have experts take a look at that. I was going to take a picture of it and bring it over tonight, but I wasn't able to. But anyway, the cost of this school is going to be tremendous. I don't think anyone has an idea of how many millions of dollars that this school is going to cost the people. I am for education, and everyone in our neighborhood is for education. We want schools and the best schools, but we want to use our money wisely. And building a school that is going to be so costly on this beautiful property that was given almost to the people to be a golf course. And even if it wasn't a golf course, it should be a park for the people to enjoy, a recreation area, not a high school where you're going to have all kinds of traffic. The traffic is unbearable. The traffic is going to stop once the school and all these thousands of kids are coming in there, supposedly. It's just an unbelievable idea. I don't know why Washoe County people just don't open up their eyes and say, hey, here's this beautiful golf course, and now I hear it made over $1 million now last year with the new management. And that golf course had held its own for a long, long time, and little by little, it kind of wasn't taken care of properly, and I was a witness to that. I wish I would have got right on it and started complaining and raising all kinds of heck. But I'll tell you, there's beautiful animals. It's going to be a treasure to lose. And there's so much more property around. And how about the government property? Why waste the people's money, move power poles, have to move do something with the ditch? And supposedly the ditch is really helping the flooding area. The water goes into the ditch. And once that ditch is underground, there's going to be a lot more water that's going to be flowing down there. And you people are going to be so sorry that you let that school be built there and ruin this $32 million property that is just a wonderful property to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is John Hesse, and then after that was Gail Miller.
Mr. Chair, if I may interject, Jessica Prenti for the record. I would just like to note for members of the public providing comment on this item that the item is not specific to the Wild Creek School. This is an item regarding whether or not schools of any type should be considered projects of regional significance. So please keep your comments on the agenda topic, if you would, please.
Good evening, John Hesse, and all my notes were on Wild Creek, so I wish you'd have said something sooner, but anyway, as far as the golf course goes, it's been there obviously for years and years. Conforti gave some land to people, and they built this beautiful golf course. Gatlin brothers had their first open there, but when I start to look at the problems that the developer is going to have for this school, first of all, it's in a floodplain. The traffic is already bad on McCarran. If everybody's been down McCarran and El Rancho and those areas, it's it's pretty bad. And then to add a large high school is going to be even worse. We've got the ore ditch to contend with. If the ore ditch is going to be maintained, it's going to be costly to maintain. And from a liability standpoint, a lot of kids in ditches, they just don't seem like they get along real well. I like to get attorneys involved, so. Also the power line, they're gonna have to, move that power line. So all of these negatives can all be mitigated. They can all be taken care of, but how much money are you gonna throw at this thing? 200 million, 300 million, 400 million? I mean, they're spending money like a bunch of, I'm not a military man, but anyway, they spend a lot of money on this one school. What are they gonna have for the other schools? So I just would think that with the large population growth that we're having, and not that I'm all for it, although it's going to be what it's going to be, they're going to need a golf course. And if you take this golf course away, the whole golf course, the front 9, the back 9, and the little par 9, you're not going to bring another golf course back. They're just too expensive to build. And we've lost a lot of them now. This new management company seems to be turning things around. I've talked to various golfers that have been out there. It looks good. I think they make some money for the county, keep it as a county golf course, have some money coming into the pockets, and build a high school, but don't build it on Wild Creek. I know there's been a lot of studies supposedly done on it. We've all been paying through it through our taxes, but I just think in common sense, it's just not a good idea to build a high school on this existing golf course. Thank you for your time.
Next is Gail Miller, and then after that will be Mike Brierly.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I am speaking on support of the adoption of new guidelines for the definition of projects of regional significance that would consider, at the very least, certain schools to be considered as projects of regional significance, which would include development of land for a public or private school, thus triggering some kind of review, hopefully by this board. Having spoken with several local officials, council people, contrary, I guess, to what Mr. Eckhart says, I have found there are quite a few that would like to see schools come before you, at least some schools, as a project of regional significance. We currently have several somewhat newer schools, and meaning maybe the last 10, 20 years, and they have caused a great deal of concern for the surrounding areas, traffic and otherwise. And it just seems to me that it's common sense that at least some schools could fall under what should be looked at as projects of regional significance to avoid issues like flooding, energy alignment, noise, and many safety issues. I hope that you will support adopting new and well-thought-out guidelines for new school building projects and land developments for schools as projects for regional significance. And then I had a comment. I did speak with Ms. Knox yesterday on the phone because I wanted some clarification on the guidelines, I guess, that you already have that speak about 325 students would trigger a project of regional significance. And she clarified for me that that is if there was like a new development that went in that would generate another 325 students. It's not the school itself, correct? Yes. Thank you very much.
Next is Mike Brierly, and then after that is Kathleen Shep.
Good evening. My name is Mike Brierly. I am quite encouraged that you are considering to have schools of large size at least be projects of regional significance. Years ago, I was an engineer with the city of Sparks, and on some occasions, schools were placed without really good planning as to traffic and location. High school next to a arterial street with fast food across the street and kids taking their lunch hour and crossing 4 lanes of traffic really doesn't meet too good of criteria. I do take exception to Mr. Eckhart's wishes as to not have any review. I really think these major high schools, which produce a lot of traffic, need to be reviewed. So with that, I just hope that some additional guidelines can be utilized and have you folks review some of these larger projects. Thank you very much.
Next is Kathleen Shupp, and then after that will be Andy Durling.
Good evening, Commissioners. Well, it makes me very unhappy to think of the possibility of a high school being placed in the center of a beautiful oasis like Wild Creek Golf Course. But I think that the school district really has no regard, and that they shouldn't be allowed the freedom to just point and choose whatever land they want to put a structure like a high school on. Some of the ways that the building of a high school hugely impacts the surrounding area are financial, and some of them are not. Marching bands and athletic competitions cause an abundance of noise, which has been proven to increase your stress levels. There's the flooding. Did you know that the water from Sun Valley is channeled into Wild Creek Golf Course? And studies have shown that that the presence of a high school increases the crime in the area that it's placed. The traffic studies that were supposedly done by Washoe County School District do not reflect the true traffic situation in our area of Sullivan, El Rancho, and North McCarran. There needs to be a study done by a company that has no interest in the outcome of the study. All of the studies that were done by the school district were done by companies that would profit by building the school. It has been determined that the sewage lines would need to be improved in order to handle the increase as well. And who's going to pay for that? They say it's not their problem. Washoe County School District originally said that 75 acres was needed for the school. That figure has now risen to almost 90 acres. It's 87 and some. They want to take those acres right out of the center of the golf course like sea lions feasting on salmon. All the while that they're saying that it's possible that some semblance of a golf course could remain for the continued pleasure of the citizens of Washoe County that actually paid for the golf course to begin with. It's very wrong and very frustrating. All of these examples are examples of significant impact. There are many more that I could cite. I certainly hope that there is still a chance that the proposed high school at Wild Creek will be denied. But even if it is too late for that project, future projects must have some oversight. I'm asking you to add that layer of oversight for the future progress of our county. Thank you.
Andy Durling, and after that will be Kim Tracy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. For the record, Andy Durling. I am a professional land use planner in the community, as well as a father of 5 Washoe County School District students. I really encourage you to retain the standards as you have them currently. The standards that are in place to define projects of regional significance are quantitative in nature and look at several metrics that judge the impacts of any development, not just a singular development or, in this case, schools across our community. There are thresholds already in place, whether it's traffic. So 6,250 trips per day that are generated by any use becomes a project of regional significance. If a school generates that much, then it's a project of regional significance. We should not lower our standards in order to just capture and cherry pick schools in order to put them through more scrutiny. Our legislature, the Nevada legislature several years ago, passed rules for our area that made it easier and more and streamlined the ability of the school district to build schools. Whether it's in the city of Reno, Sparks, or Washoe County, schools are able to be developed through an administrative process. That's a site plan review in the city of Reno or Washoe County, or an administrative review in the city of Sparks. So we already have review at a local level, and it's supposed to be a streamlined review. And now we're adding in the potential of another hurdle at a public level to elevate it up to the regional planning commission for conformance as projects of regional significance. I think that's, I don't think that's appropriate. Additionally, our voters approved Washoe County 1 a couple of years ago. That was a mandate for the school district to build new schools. Let's make it easier for them to build schools faster to alleviate the overcrowding that we were unable to address for many, many decades in this community. So I encourage you to retain the standards you have. They are good standards. As a professional, when we go through and analyze any project, whether it's a school, a subdivision, it doesn't matter. If it meets the thresholds of project of regional significance, it needs to come to you, not just by a specific use. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests to speak?
Yes, we have a few more. It'll be Kim Tracy, and then after that is George Lee.
Okay.
Good evening, my name is Kim Tracy, and I would like to appeal to you to definitely consider schools RPS. It makes sense to set a number or a size, but a high school certainly is a regional, of regional significance. And I'm here because of Wild Creek, but as our attorney says, you know, I have to kind of focus on what the problem is. But I would like to say, as Mr. Etchert had stated, there were meetings between Washoe County, the RSCVA, and all of that. No, I'd like to say that the reason that happened is because of the blowback from the Wild Creek area people. I don't think there would have been so much attention drawn to it if we had not drawn as much attention to it as we did. And I think that to prevent that in the future, if the high schools were RPS determined, then a multi-jurisdictional group such as yourself could prevent that. And I think that Mr. Etchert should welcome that. I think he's looking at this all wrong. I think that that should be a welcome entity, something that would be reviewed in advance and not have prevented all the things that have happened now, like lawsuits and whatnot. I think that there's no reason when you're spending the public's money why you wouldn't want as much review as possible and things to be done correctly. The golf course is precious to all of us as a green space, not just as a golf course, but as a green space. And it was something that you guys put in place for the community, and now it is changing for the community. And maybe if there was some consistency in the planning and then the oversight of the change of that, then we would do better as a community overall. So considering it of regional significance makes all the sense in the world. It's not the same as putting in a big building like a Walmart. We're talking about thousands of students with all cars. All of them potentially have cars, can drive, their parents will drive them. The traffic is already horrific. If you're ever in that area in the morning or in the afternoon on any weekday, it's already overwhelming and at a standstill. So I think that we really need to focus a little bit more on what will prevent all the trouble we've run into with this project in the future, and that is more oversight. So making it of regional significance makes absolutely all the sense in the world as far as I'm concerned, and I hope you'll consider strongly making that change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up will be George Lee and then Danny Cleus.
George Lee for the record. I believe you have standards in place, like you can't approve anything or can't consider it less than the need for examination with less than 100 yards from a floodplain. Am I correct in that? I believe that's one of the things I read in your packet. And the second thing is, you're talking about, and one of the reasons I think that Mr. Etchart applied for some oversight on the movement of the power line was because you have a 60 kilowatt limitation on power line movement or messing with the power lines, right? Coming out of the junction point, which is right at the corner of El Rancho and Sullivan. The third thing is, you guys are supposed to be oversight. You are supposed to make sure that things are safe and well done and properly planned and that fit the needs of the overall plan for Washoe County, which includes Truckee, and I assume Truckee Meadows includes all of this, but it mainly includes because the Washoe County school system is huge. And if you now give them a break and go, hey, we'll just let you do what you want to do. If you give them that, then you are taking away the oversight you are supposed to be giving to this area. Not to Las Vegas, not to the rurals, but to this area. This is the area you serve. So don't just throw that away. And if it takes an extra month to find out that they've made some stupefying mistake and that they need to step back and do a better job. You know, I try to get on to Sullivan in the morning. And Sullivan, you say, oh, we're only going to be interested in 6,400 or 6,250 or whatever it is, trips a day. Well, there's already probably 2,000 between Sullivan and El Rancho, which will be the feeds for this school. And, oh, the other thing is we're talking about moving a power line that goes down Sullivan. You're going to have to move it if you're going to enlarge the size of that street, because the street is a single lane country road that goes through next to the golf course. Anyway, the point is, don't give up that opportunity to maintain your oversight levels just because this one particular time they ask for it.
Thank you.
Next up is Danny Cleus, and after that will be Jerry Heckathorn.
Danny Cleus for the record. Somebody needs to overlook the school district. Good one is Stonegate, building a high school right in a floodplain, right next to a wet lake that used to be dry all the time. Kudos. Wild Creek Golf Course, another one, floodplain, kudos. Look at all the resizing that Washoe County School District has to do with high schools. Perfect example is Del Monte. Everybody knows that area was going to be built up. Why not build a school big enough for the area before they have to remodel again and waste more taxpayer money? WC1, that was a great tax. Too bad Washoe County School District was holding $88 million before that tax was applied, saying that they had no money for our schools. Washoe County School District cannot be trusted in any sort of way because of their decisions. Look at all their decisions that they made. And this doesn't just apply to high schools. Look at elementary schools. How many kids get dropped off and picked up from elementary schools? The traffic is horrendous, no matter where you go. It could be a busy street, it could be a side street. They're clogged up. Nobody can trust anybody anymore. It's hard enough to try to get our local government to do the right thing. Washoe County School District thinks they can fly under the radar. They shouldn't be able to. You should hold them accountable. Thank you.
Next up is Jerry Heckathorn, Heckathorn, and then Wesley Griffin.
My name is Jerry Heckathorn. I'm a resident of Washoe County for quite a few years. I want to thank all of you for your service here. I've been to several planning commission meetings, and we seem to get more attention from you people. You ask questions and you think about things, and I really appreciate that. I do believe that the school should be looked at by you people. It's whether it's 325 kids or 50, it doesn't matter. The 50 would reflect the size of the community it's going in. So in a small community, even 50 students would make a difference to them. But if we're looking at the size of the classes they're talking about at Wild Creek, it's tremendous. And I don't believe the studies that they have done because they're paying for it. And I've never known a developer or a builder that's taken a report that didn't look favorable to them. So they take what they can get to make them look good. I think it's a travesty to build this there, not just losing the golf course, but the location. It's going to be dangerous for the kids. They're high school kids, and some of them are going to be walking on McCarran, and that's not a good site for kids either. But please consider changing this to where you do take care of the schools too. Thank you.
And the last one I have is Wesley Griffin.
Good evening. My name is Wesley Griffin. I'm with Save Wild Creek. I think this particular case is a perfect example of why school districts or schools developing on private land or public land or any kind of land needs to be included in some way to be considered a project of regional significance. Let me just state that when this was brought before the 5 bodies that approved looking at this to consider whether or not this was a good idea for our community, all of the citizens in our area had no idea what was going on until this was actually brought and signed by these 5 bodies. Now, I would think if this had been considered a plan of, if there'd been a requirement that this be considered a plan of regional significance, the citizens would have known what was going on. In this particular case, it was totally under the radar. One of the board members of the RSCVA, who is also a city councilman, had no idea that this was going on. So this was done in a way to actually defraud the citizens of our area. When we first heard about it, we said, well, was there another plan? Was there some other plan? I mean, here you're gonna destroy a $30,000 to $40,000 golf course to put a school on when there's land. I mean, it's not like we have a shortage of land around here, and there's plenty of other areas and plenty of other space that could be used for a school, including federal land, which could be bought at a very low cost per acre. We said, well, where's Plan B? Well, Mr. Eckert told us there is no Plan B. If you were a private person and you are working for a private company and you came up came up with a plan to spend $200 to $300 million of that company's money, and you hadn't even considered a second plan, you'd probably be fired. We have a situation here where we have a school that's going to come in and cannibalize our public parks, our green spaces. Part of the goal of the regional plan is to maintain recreational areas and green spaces, and that's going directly against this. We need more oversight of the Washoe County School District in all areas, apparently. So I urge you to require that schools, development of schools be considered a plan of regional significance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests to speak on this item?
I have none.
Okay. I will close public comment then and bring it back to the commission and turn it over to Commissioner Vanderwell.
Thank you. I'd like to know, as we're crafting this, because I know when we do new development and the developer puts aside, okay, this is where a school is going to be proposed, whether it be middle school, high school, elementary school. I guess what I'd like to see is I'd like to see some language in there where we can look at when we are going into an existing neighborhood that has sat, how we're going to grade that, or as far as impacts and things like that, into an existing neighborhood. I think we see more impact when we're going into an existing neighborhood versus when we're starting a brand new development from the dirt up. because those people that buy in those areas understand that, okay, I'm gonna have a school here. And this is and I understand what the impact is. So I don't know how we can word that, but, because I know there's been a few schools that have gone into existing neighborhoods, and I think that needs to be addressed. And then also on, I guess, student population, yeah, I think 325 is maybe too low, and 2,000 I think is too high. I think we need to find like a middle. But I do agree that it should start with high schools. So that's it for my comments.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Trailjack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just in terms of, the Regional Planning Governing Board is the one that is suggesting that certain schools or schools may be projects of regional significance. And they've asked us to forward some language. So to add on to what Commissioner Vanderwell said is that it would be when we have standardized language to how much acreage is required, how much acreage does it require to build an elementary school? How much to build a middle school, and how much to build a high school? Because we see developers say, well, I've set aside 20 acres for a high school. Is that reasonable? I don't know. So in terms of getting those questions answered and to address what the Regional Governing Board is asking us to consider is that schools are probably projects of regional significance.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
One point of clarification for the process, and I'll also turn it to Jessica. So with this RPC resolution, so NRS basically allows the RPC to adopt a resolution that would have the guidelines of a PRS. So the Regional Planning Governing Board is asking the RPC to consider that, but at the end, this is an RPC resolution solely at this point. We would take it back to the governing board just as an item for information, but it would start and end here.
Yes, I agree with Ms. Knox. Jessica Prunty for the record. So this body is charged with the statutory obligation to develop and adopt guidelines, in addition to those that are already set forth in statute, of what constitutes a project of regional significance. And so the governing board discussion was to send it back down here for this body's expertise to weigh in and consider the item. And whether that's to give direction to staff to further evaluate and consider, or to adopt a resolution or a guideline at this time or at a future meeting. And then that would just be reported back, the results of your actions, to the governing board.
Thank you. Can I take a step back here with a couple of questions? The first question is, it came up in public comment that a school that hits the current thresholds for a PRS is reviewed by this body for conformance with the regional plan. Is that true?
If a school were to hit those thresholds, absolutely. Any project that hits that threshold would come through.
Okay. So, given the entitlement process for a school, at what phase does if it hit those PRS thresholds now for traffic or sewer or, whatever, the population, at what point would it come to this body for a conformance review?
So a state statute and the guidelines are a little bit more broad in terms of when it can come to this board. Projects that go through any type of approval, so whether it's master plan, zoning, tentative map, or even a building permit, would come to this body. So in terms of exactly when it would come, it's really dependent on the local government's process at that point. So we've had some projects come as a building permit, and we've had some projects come, I'm not talking about schools, but in generally for PRS, they've come as a building permit, or they've come during the master plan amendment or a zoning map amendment. Obviously, the further in the process you get, the more defined that project is. But this allows the ability to see it at any point in the development review process.
Mr. Chairman, Jessica Prunty for the record. The statute requires that a project of regional significance has to come up for conformance review before construction. So that's the only timing deadline that's set forth in statute.
So a follow-up question then, has the RPC or regional planning ever reviewed a project of regional significance for a school that has hit the PRS thresholds?
In my research, I have not found that that's happened.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Vanderbilt.
Then I have a follow-up question, because I guess I want clarification on where it says student population K through 12, but not less than 325 students. Well, if the RPC has never seen a school, how are we determining students? So is this proposal, or because the school is empty at the time they're doing it?
So,
I mean, I guess that's where I'm coming from is, okay, you know, we're building an empty school and we won't know how many students we have in it until we open it. So,
if I may, yeah, that specific threshold and the way that it has been identified with legal counsel as well is if a project were to come in, so say a master planned community or a community that's basically going to generate 325 students or more, that would be considered a project of regional significance, not a school itself.
Yeah.
okay.
Jessica Prunty for the record. To add on to what Lauren just said, the past interpretation of that criteria is essentially an increase of student population in the region, not a relocation of students within the region. So we're not talking about existing students in the region. We're talking about people moving in.
Okay, so see, that makes sense.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Travolta?
So then with the current as I'm referring to, which was the resolution number 13-06, which defined projects of regional significance, and what Commissioner Vanderwell was addressing, which is on page 2 of that resolution, where it says the following guidelines apply to projects where proposed by anyone other than a public utility. So when we're talking about, I understand student population, so any development or any proposed whatever that would generate student population, if it's over 325 or 326, it's regionally significant. So a housing development that would potentially move in 326 possible K-12 students, does not a school do the same thing?
I think it depends on the school. But the way that criteria has been framed and interpreted since it was adopted, and I will point out that the student population criterion is the only one of the thresholds of the PRS guidelines that has been adopted by this body that doesn't currently exist in statute. And the intention behind that adoption, from my review of this body's documents, is that if you basically have, let's keep it simple, we have 325 families moving into the area, maybe because of an employment opportunity, and they each have one child, then that would trigger that. So, but if you're looking at our existing population within the Truckee Meadows and the building of a school to serve the existing population, that threshold would not necessarily trigger conformance review.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
I have a follow-up question then, okay? So, because all of us in our respective jurisdictions, when a development is approved, we get a letter from Washoe County School District that states, by this development, it will generate X number of students, okay? So what we're saying is, but that one development is not gonna fill that school. So I guess what I'm getting at is, there's not a where's the cumulative number of the developments that would feed into that school? Because I think that's possibly where it's missing, is because we're doing it by development.
That's exactly correct, Ms.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't confused.
And you're empowered, this body, to make changes to that if you want to clarify.
Thank you. To follow up on Commissioner Vanderwall, your point about the letters that we receive at our respective bodies when we see a development proposal, I don't recall ever seeing in those letters from Mike Boster, whoever is writing it, it's saying that the students that would be generated, I don't know, for lack of a better word, from that development are new students to the area. And maybe, Pete, if you could follow up on that, just to answer that question. I'm trying to understand how the school district, when it creates those estimates of student generation for projects, how that number that you determine to estimate capacity for schools compares to what Jessica was saying relative to her interpretation of the PRS standards, that it's new students to the region that would create that potential regional impact.
Pete Etchart again, Chief Operating Officer, Washoe County School District. Now, we have obviously no way of calculating how many students are new to the region versus how many are relocating. All we can do is say, based on historical norms, when you build a certain type of housing unit, how many students are normally generated by that housing unit. That's what's put in the letter that, as you said, indicated the Washoe County School District provides to all the agencies, saying, as you call it, Mr. Boster's letters to you, saying based on the proposed number of housing units being built, it will generate approximately this many students. Commissioner Vanderwall is correct in that we do not actually tell you the cumulative number. Now, we as a school district definitely keep track of that cumulative number. We look at every proposed development. We work with regional planning to see how many projected students are coming to an area before we ever decide to build a school. We always have to recognize we don't build schools and think the kids may come later. We only build schools after developments are approved by the local agencies. Once they're approved by you or the local agencies, then we go forward with the process of building schools. So we try to stay ahead of the fact and make sure that we work on what's proposed out there, handbooks that are coming in, and then we work with developers again to try to plan for future schools. And we work very, very closely. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. It takes years sometimes to make sure that we have that property available for future use. And right now, we are trying to acquire property for developments that may not happen for many, many years. But that's really important to us because we don't want to get caught in a situation that all of a sudden developments occur and then we're trying to scramble to find a property. That's the position the Washoe County School District was in for many, many years. And still are right now. You're right. We're right now trying to get caught up, and that's what we're doing over the next several years to get caught up. But we will continue to provide the information to the elected officials to make sure that they know, as these developments are occurring, how many students are being generated. But I can't separate, again, between new to the region versus people that are relocating. But again, schools do not generate students. We only are the provider of services, just like a library or a fire station or police station, providing a service to when these new developments occur.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Javilcek.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
I would like to ask one more question first. And it relates to policy 4.1.5, which is the policy in the regional plan that talks about the review of projects of regional significance. And then it references policy 4.1.3, which is the 6 conformance review standards that we use for any type of conformance. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but when we talk about a PRS, it's not related to a specific development's impacts on things like noise levels or glare or various things that we would look at on our respective bodies for things like special use permits or even tentative maps. It's whether the proposal is consistent with the goals and policies of the regional plan. So it's kind of at that 30,000 foot level. That's why it's a project of regional significance. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Commissioner Chvilcek.
Thank you. I move to direct staff to utilize the feedback provided to draft a new RPC resolution adopting guidelines for the definition of projects of regional significance based on everything that was heard this evening.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Commissioner Fewens here. I think that, my personal opinion, the guidelines are already in place for projects of regional significance. And I think it's a slippery slope if we start going down this by just cherry picking a certain use for projects of regional significance. I think we need to take no action in this. I think it's already in place. I think we have done those, that if it is a project of regional significance, it will come in front of us. I don't think you should, I think it's a slippery slope, whether if you start just cherry picking certain uses to come in front of us, whether it's a school, whatever it is. I just think it's a slippery slope, and I think my personal opinion, take no action on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, have a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Thank you.
Nay.
Okay. So we will move on then to item 7, members and directors reports.
So I have no updates at this time. Our next meeting is February 13th. We did have a doodle poll out to potentially host another meeting more specific to the regional plan update, but it doesn't look like it's garnered much support. So at this point, I believe we'll be holding it on the 13th.
Okay. Item 7B, legal counsel report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jessica Prunty for the record. Nothing to report today.
Thank you. Item number 8, requests for future agenda items. Mr. Vanderwall?
If we can follow up, and I asked about this when we had Echeverria before us in November, if we could get a presentation on sewer capacity and things like that. If I can just get an update where that is and when we're possibly going to see that. Please, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 9, public comment. Do we have any requests to speak on this item?
Yes, I have one. Danny Cleus.
Okay.
With all the reports coming out, and it's a sad thing to say about Truckee Meadows, we get a failing grade on most everything, if not really close to a failing grade. Now, this grade should be, I'm assuming it's the same as what we used to have in school, where it's A through F. If things are a D and an F all the time, what is wrong with the picture? Why can't the Truckee Meadows or the surrounding area be a grade A? Think about it. What is your guys' job to do? And how come it's failing? D's and F's are failing grades in school. We need to turn that around and make this a beautiful place. Air quality, F. Roads, D's. Schools, F. The only reason kids are passing school now is because they took the testing away. What does that say? They're still not teaching kids in school. I don't know. I've lived here almost all my life. It'll be 46 years this year. The problems you have now, school districts, roads, everything, they're failing. I really have a problem with the city of Sparks right now. because they have their own problems. Their own people are complaining about them. But yet, they're going down the road, well, it's already in place, let us go. No, something has to be done. Why have a failing grade? Why can't you bring the Truckee Meadows area back to an A, where everybody enjoys everything? Yeah, you're not gonna make everybody happy, but if you have an A, then you can improve to A+. You just can't let it go the way it's been going for years and years and years. The Truckee Meadows is so ran down that I don't even like calling this area my home anymore. And it's pretty bad because I used to be really proud of this area. I used to be proud that I was a resident of Washoe County. I am saddened over the last probably 15 years that the Truckee Meadows, Washoe County, has gone to crap. Not only our fire, our police, downtown. I haven't been downtown in years. The only reason I go down there right now is because of frickin' meetings. That's sad. And you know what? 90% of the people I talk to feel the same way. We don't like coming out of our rural lifestyle to go downtown to Slimeball. In the city of Sparks, same thing, Victorian Square. Used to be a nice place to visit. Now it's all houses.
I have one more. It's George Lee.
Hi, George Lee again. I know that I don't have the right to ask for this, but you should add to your agenda for your next meeting this business of clearing up this nomenclature in the standard for school sizes or construction sizes, whatever it is. It should be based on total amount of students or people involved in it, because that's what causes the traffic, the stuff. Otherwise, you leave it open for the school system to play with you, to play you like a violin, to say, oh, well, we're only gonna put 250 people in there, or we don't see this as being an increase because, well, we're not keeping track of it, but we don't see it as an increase of any. So in order to get out of that scrutiny, you're leaving an open door for them to be able to do it to you. And that's not your job. Your job is to look and see. The reason those criteria were set the way they were, I don't know who set the wording, but it needs to be based on the real impact of that development. That would mean the size of it, not how many people were increased or how many people the school system decided to bus into it, or how many people this particular development had, you know, coming from whether they were living in Sparks and they found they could live cheaper in this new development, and so they moved there. That wouldn't be an increase, and yet it would change the development impact. And that's what it's all about. It's all about the impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests to speak on this item?
I have none.
Okay, we'll close public comment then and ask for any written correspondence.
We have none at this time.
Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn then?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, Commissioner Peterson was on it. Who seconded?
Chesney.
Chesney, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.